When Dr. Helen Foster, a museum curator, first inspected this 1,895 portrait in 2021, she observed what countless others had witnessed over the previous 126 years. It depicted two siblings in identical white frocks, clasping hands within a garden setting, their expressions bearing the solemn demeanor characteristic of the Victorian era. The picture had been given anonymously to the Boston Historical Society, accompanied solely by a note written by hand. It read, "The Davies sisters, 1,895, may they finally rest." Helen nearly catalogued it without further consideration. However, a peculiar detail about the younger girl's hand then captured her attention: the unusual curl of the fingers, the strange positioning. She requested a high-definition digital scan. The details uncovered by this process made Helen comprehend why this image had been concealed for over 100 years, and the true meaning behind the note's plea for them to, finally, rest. Before we disclose what is truly present in this picture, subscribe now, as the information you will discover will permanently alter your perception of every vintage family photo. This is not merely a portrait of two sisters, it is an image of a vow that endured past death. The picture was delivered to the Boston Historical Society on March 15, 2021, contained within a simple manila envelope lacking a return address. Inside was a solitary sepia-colored photograph, roughly 5 by 7 inches, fixed onto a sturdy cardboard mount, consistent with studio practices from the 1,890 seconds. The picture displayed two young girls, positioned in what seemed to be a cultivated garden. The elder child, possibly 10 or 11 years of age, stood to the left, dressed in a white Victorian-era gown featuring a lace collar and billowing sleeves. Her dark hair was drawn tightly away from her face. Her countenance was grave, nearly tormented. Next to her stood a smaller girl, perhaps 6 or 7, also clothed in white. She was shorter and more slender, with similarly dark hair and a serious look. The younger girl's right hand was grasped within the older girl's left hand. Their fingers were laced together firmly. Behind them was a background of roses climbing a lattice structure. Gentle light from the late afternoon implied the photo was taken outside, an uncommon practice for the period when most formal pictures were captured inside studios with managed lighting. Along the bottom of the photograph, inscribed in faded brown ink, were the words, "Lee and Rose Davies, June 1,895. The note that came with it, written on contemporary paper in an unsteady, aged script, stated simply, "The Davies sisters, 1,895. May they finally rest. I can't keep this any longer." Someone should know the truth. Dr. Helen Foster, aged 52, had served as the photographic archives curator at the Boston Historical Society for 18 years. She had examined thousands of portraits from the Victorian age. This one initially appeared ordinary, just another posed picture of children from an affluent family, the sort of image that fills innumerable archives nationwide. Yet something about it unsettled Helen. She could not immediately pinpoint what it was. She studied the photograph more intently, using a magnifying lens. The older girl, identified as Lily by the inscription, stared directly at the camera lens. Her expression was hard to decipher, not entirely sorrowful, not entirely furious, but closer to acceptance or maybe resolve. The younger girl, Rose, had her head angled slightly toward her sister. Her eyes were also directed at the camera, yet they seemed vacant, clouded. Her lips were parted just a little. It was then that Helen noticed the hand. Rose's hand, the one being held by Lily, possessed a strange quality. The fingers were bent in a manner that seemed unnatural. The skin tone looked marginally different from the rest of her visible skin, darker, perhaps, or stained in a way the sepia tint could not completely conceal. Helen retrieved her measurement instruments and inspected the photograph's proportions and mounting method. Everything aligned with techniques from 1,895. The picture was not a contemporary fake, yet there was an undeniable wrongness to it that she could not articulate. She resolved to have the image scanned digitally at the utmost possible resolution. The Society had just obtained a new scanner able to capture minutiae at 12,800 dots per inches, a level of detail that would bring to light elements invisible to the unaided eye, details that photographers and viewers from the Victorian age could never have detected. The scanning was scheduled for March 18th, 3 days later. Helen placed the portrait into a preservation box and attempted to dismiss it from her thoughts. But that evening, she dreamed of it. In her dream, the 2 children from the portrait were standing in her office. The older sister, Lily, was weeping without a sound. The younger one, Rose, remained perfectly motionless, her eyes unblinking, her chest still. Lily repeated the same phrase in a hushed tone, again and again. I gave my word. I gave my word I would not release my grip. I gave my word. The high-definition scanning procedure required 4 hours to finish. Helen waited in the Society's digital imaging lab alongside Marcus Chen, their specialist in visual analysis, observing as the picture was gradually analyzed by the scanner's sophisticated sensors. The equipment recorded not only the visible picture but also infrared and ultraviolet data, which could uncover concealed features, edits, or deterioration not apparent under normal observation. Once the scan concluded, Marcus opened the file on his computer. The picture materialized on the large 4K display with incredible clarity. Every particle of the photographic emulsion was distinct, along with each minute scratch and flaw on the mounting board, every strand of the paper. Let's begin with a broad overview, Marcus stated, increasing the magnification to 200%. The picture is genuine, unquestionably from the 1,890 seconds, judging by the paper makeup and emulsion variety. No evidence of contemporary editing or fabrication. Helen moved nearer to the monitor. Can you concentrate on the younger girl's hand? Marcus enlarged the view on Rose's right hand, the one clasping Lily's. At 800% magnification, details emerged that had been undetectable to the unaided eye. The texture of the skin was abnormal. While Lily's hand displayed the typical fine lines and texture of living skin, Rose's hand had a smooth, almost synthetic appearance. The fingers, which had seemed merely strangely bent at normal size, were now clearly rigid, fixed in place not by living tissue, but by some other means. That's livor mortis, Helen murmured. Post-mortem settling of blood, the darker staining. That child was deceased when this picture was taken. Post-death photography was a frequent practice during the Victorian period, but those images were always clearly post-mortem. Children were arranged in caskets or on beds, plainly departed, often surrounded by floral arrangements intended as memorial keepsakes. This picture was not the same. This picture was designed to give the impression that both children were living. Marcus activated the infrared layer of the scan. In infrared, living and deceased tissue reflect light differently. The contrast between Lily and Rose became sharp and irrefutable. Lily's body displayed the thermal signature patterns consistent with a living person, or more accurately, the residual impressions that living individuals leave in photographs even after 126 years. Rose's body showed a complete absence of such a signature. No thermal pattern whatsoever, just a cold, even reflection. The older sister was alive, Marcus verified. The younger one had been deceased for some time. Judging by the skin discoloration visible at this resolution, I would estimate at least several days, possibly a week. A cold sensation traveled down Helen's spine. Show me their faces, the highest detail possible. Marcus zoomed in on Rose's face at 1600% magnification. The details were harrowing. The child's eyes, which had appeared merely unfocused at normal viewing, were now unmistakably clouded. The corneas had started to form the milky haze that appears hours after death. Her slightly parted lips showed the tip of her tongue, which had a darkened, dried-out look. But the most sorrowful detail was the cosmetics. At this level of magnification, Helen could see that someone had meticulously applied powder and blush to Rose's face to create artificial color in her cheeks. Someone had arranged her with great care to conceal the more severe indications of death. Someone had taken remarkable measures to create the illusion of life. Now Marcus zoomed in on Lily's face. There were tears, scarcely noticeable at standard resolution but undeniable at this magnification. Lily had been crying when the photograph was captured. Her eyes showed signs of having wept, their edges inflamed. The paths of her tears were discernible on her cheeks, visible underneath the cosmetic powder she also wore. And there was an additional discovery, something inscribed on the cardboard mount beneath the picture. It was so faint it could not be seen without digital augmentation. Marcus modified the contrast and clarity settings. Text materialized, written in pencil in the unsophisticated script of a child. I gave my word to Mama I would hold her hand for always. I did not break my word. June 12, 1895. Helen promptly initiated a search through historical documents for the Davies family. Locating information from 1895 proved difficult, but the Boston Historical Society possessed vast archives and links to genealogical data sources. Within 2 days, Helen had located them. The Davies family had resided in Boston's Beacon Hill area. The father, Robert Davies, was a prosperous textile merchant. The mother, Eleanor Davies, descended from an established Boston lineage. They were parents to 2 daughters, Lily, born in March 1884, and Rose, born in September 1888. Rose Davies passed away on June 3, 1895, at 6 years and 9 months of age. The listed cause was scarlet fever. Lily Davies died 7 days afterward, on June 10, 1895, at 11 years and 3 months old. The cause, again, was scarlet fever. The picture was dated June 1895, indicating it was captured sometime between Rose's death on June 3 and Lily's passing on June 10. Helen located the death certificates within the Massachusetts State Archives. Both girls were laid to rest in Mount Auburn Cemetery on June 11, 1895, within the family plot. A combined funeral service was conducted at Trinity Church, yet there was a peculiar detail in the interment documents. The entry for Rose's burial stated, "Interment delayed owing to family situation. Deceased remained at family residence from June 3 to 10th. Rose's body had been kept at the family home for 7 days prior to burial. During June in Boston, where archived meteorological records showed temperatures that week had climbed into the mid-80s, Helen discovered a news item from the Boston Globe, dated June 12, 1895, headlined, "Tragedy befalls Davies family. Both daughters lost to scarlet fever." The article detailed how the prominent Beacon Hill family of Robert and Eleanor Davies was grieving the catastrophic loss of both their children within 1 week. Rose Davies, age 6, had succumbed to scarlet fever on June 3. Her sister Lily, age 11, became sick soon after and died on June 10. Sources acquainted with the family indicated that Lily had declined to depart from her sister's side during the sickness and had demanded to stay with her even after Rose's passing. The dual funeral was held the previous day at Trinity Church. Mrs. Davies was reported to be immobilized by sorrow and under a physician's care. Helen cross-referenced this with municipal documents and found another record. On June 8, 1895, a medical practitioner named Dr. Samuel Morrison had been called to the Davies residence by neighbors who reported worrisome conditions. Dr. Morrison's report, filed with the City Health Department, noted, attended 44 Beacon Street concerning welfare issues, discovered the surviving child, Lily Davies, age 11, unwilling to be parted from her deceased sister's remains. The child stated she had pledged to her mother to remain with her sister. The mother and father are both unwell with grief and fever. The father is recuperating from scarlet fever. The mother is in a condition of nervous exhaustion. The child has been sleeping next to her deceased sister's body for 5 days. Despite health risks, the family would not permit a prompt burial, recommended immediate action, but no action was taken. Rose's body stayed at the house for 2 more days, and at a certain point during that week, someone had made arrangements for a photographer to visit the home. Someone had arranged the 2 girls together in the garden, had clothed them in identical white dresses, had placed them with hands clasped, and had instructed Lily to gaze at the camera and attempt not to weep. Someone had produced a photograph that depicted both Davies' daughters together one last time, as if both were still among the living. Helen's investigation directed her to the records of the Boston Photographers Guild, where she found listings of active photographers operating in 1895. A single name was linked to the Davies family, Thomas Blackwell, a photographer who focused on memorial portraiture. His business ledger, kept within the Society's collection, included an entry dated June 7, 1895. Davies residence, 44 Beacon Street. Memorial portrait, 2 subjects. Special arrangements required. Payment, $50. That sum, $50 in 1895, was an enormous amount, equivalent to nearly $1,800 today, far exceeding the cost of a standard memorial picture. Helen looked for further details concerning Thomas Blackwell and discovered his personal journal, which had been given to the Society in 1957 by his granddaughter. She had the diary retrieved from the archives and, upon its arrival, meticulously turned its delicate pages to June of 1895. The entry for June 7th, 1895, was more extensive than the others. Received an urgent call to the Davies household on Beacon Hill. The circumstances there rank among the most distressing I have witnessed in 2 decades of memorial photography. The younger daughter, Rose, passed from scarlet fever 4 days prior. The elder daughter, Lily, has also fallen to the disease and, per the family doctor, has little time left. Yet the true profundity of the horror is this. Lily has adamantly refused to be separated from her departed sister's remains. She sleeps next to the body. She clasps the deceased child's hand. She converses with her as though she still lives. The mother is too overwhelmed by sorrow to intercede. The father is frail from his own sickness. They contacted me at Lily's own request. The child desires a portrait of herself with her sister so her mother can remember them together. I attempted to explain that a conventional memorial portrait could be created, but Lily became distraught. She insisted the picture must depict both of them as living and together. She made me vow to pose them in a manner that would conceal Rose's true state. I am profoundly unsettled by this fabrication, yet the child is dying and her parents are too shattered to deny her any wish. I consented. May God forgive me, I consented. I photographed the 2 girls in the garden, arranging them with great care so that Rose's condition would not be apparent. I positioned them hand in hand, just as Lily demanded. The older girl wept continuously, yet she endeavored to remain motionless for the long exposure. She whispered to her sister the entire time, urging her to be calm, to hold still just a while longer. The younger girl, of course, was perfectly still. I finished the work in a half hour and departed with all haste. The father compensated me at twice my normal fee and implored me to never speak of this affair. I will honor that plea. But I shall never erase from my memory the vision of that living child, gripping her dead sister's hand, striving with such desperate determination to maintain a pretense of normality, fighting so hard to keep a promise no child should ever have been tasked to make. Helen leaned back, her hands unsteady. The photograph now made a dreadful, heartbreaking sense. This was not a deception crafted to mislead the world. It was a dying girl's final present to her devastated parents, a falsehood born from love, a last, valiant effort to provide them with a single memory, not saturated in tragedy. Lily had known she was dying. She had understood this portrait would be her final act, and she had used it to construct an illusion, a moment suspended in time where both Davies' daughters were together, alive and unbroken. Lily Davies died 3 days after the photograph was taken. Helen located her death certificate and accompanying medical records. The attending physician, Dr. Samuel Morrison, had noted, patient's condition deteriorated swiftly following protracted contact with her deceased sibling's body. Scarlet fever was compounded by extreme exhaustion and profound grief. Patient refused all nourishment and hydration in her final 48 hours. Her final words were, "I kept my promise." Lily was laid to rest beside Rose on June 11, 1895. The combined funeral service was attended by more than 200 individuals. The Boston Globe reported that the girl's mother, Eleanor Davies, collapsed during the ceremony and had to be physically assisted from the chapel. Helen investigated what became of the parents following their daughters' deaths. The documents revealed a sorrowful tale. Eleanor Davies never regained her emotional stability. She was committed to McLean Asylum in August 1895, diagnosed with severe melancholia and nervous exhaustion. She lived there for the next 12 years, largely withdrawn and non-communicative, often gazing at a portrait she kept in her room. Asylum records described it as a picture of her 2 daughters in white dresses, holding hands, the very photograph Helen was now studying. Robert Davies sold the Beacon Street residence in September 1895. He relocated to New York in an attempt to start anew. He entered a second marriage in 1899, but the union was brief. His new wife left him, citing his perpetual fixation on his deceased family. Robert died in 1904 at the age of 49 from heart failure. His obituary made only a passing reference to his first family, noting he was preceded in death by his daughters, Lily and Rose, and his first wife, Eleanor. The photograph's journey, however, did not conclude there. Helen tracked its ownership through the years. After Eleanor's death in 1907, her few belongings were sent to her sister, Margaret Hartwell, who had been estranged from Eleanor during her life. Margaret understood immediately what the image depicted. She wrote in her diary, "Eleanor kept this portrait in her asylum room for 12 years. She would look at it for hours, speaking softly to her girls. I now comprehend why. Lily is alive in this picture, but Rose is already departed." Eleanor was staring at that sliver of time when she still had one living daughter left, while desperately pretending she still had both. It is the most agonizing form of solace. I cannot bear to keep it. It is too painful, yet I cannot bring myself to destroy it. It is all that remains of those poor children. Margaret stored the photograph in a storage trunk, where it remained for 5 decades, until her death in 1957. Her daughter, Catherine, inherited it and kept it concealed, never revealing it to anyone. Catherine died in 1998, and the photograph was passed to her son, James Hartwell, then aged 73. It was James who ultimately mailed it to the Historical Society in 2021. Helen managed to locate him through genealogical research and telephoned him. "I am 94 years old," James told her, his voice frail yet distinct. "My mother explained the nature of that photograph to me when I was a boy. She said it was cursed not by magic, but by love. She said it shows what love becomes when it will not release its grasp, even when releasing it is the only kindness remaining. I have been the keeper of that photograph for 23 years, since my mother's passing. I am now dying. Cancer. I do not wish for my own children to inherit this weight. Let history possess it. Let someone else remember those girls." He passed away a fortnight after sending the photograph. His obituary made no mention of the Davies sisters or the portrait. Dr. Helen Foster presented her research to the Boston Historical Society's board in April 2021. The reaction was mixed. Some members believed the photograph should be exhibited as a significant historical artifact that sheds light on Victorian-era perspectives on death and childhood. Others contended it was too distressing, too personal, and too anguish-filled for public display. Helen argued for a compromise, to preserve it, document it thoroughly, but limit its accessibility. She proposed making it available to academic researchers, but not putting it on casual public exhibition, thereby showing respect for the tragic history it embodies. The board concurred. The photograph was catalogued, digitally archived, and placed into the Society's restricted collection. A comprehensive historical file was created, documenting the full scope of Helen's discoveries regarding the Davies family. Yet, Helen found herself fixated on a single detail, the concealed inscription. "I promised Mama I would hold her hand forever." What was the exact nature of this promise? Returning to the medical files, Helen discovered an entry she had previously overlooked. Rose Davies had been ill for 3 weeks prior to her passing. During that period, according to Dr. Morrison's notations, Lily had adamantly refused to be away from her sister's side. In a note dated May 28, 1895, 6 days before Rose's death, Dr. Morrison had written, "The elder sister, Lily, has now contracted scarlet fever, yet she insists on staying with the younger sister, Rose, despite the clear risk to her own health. Attempts to separate them provoked extreme distress in Lily. She maintains she gave her mother her word that she would hold Rose's hand until her sister recovered. Mrs. Davies, in her own distraught state, has endorsed this arrangement. I fear the outcome will be the loss of both children." The promise had not been about death, it had been about providing comfort. Eleanor Davies, witnessing her younger daughter's suffering, had asked Lily to hold Rose's hand, to soothe her, to remain with her until everything was better. Lily had interpreted this instruction with absolute, tragic literalism. She held Rose's hand throughout her sickness. She held it when Rose died. She held it for the 7 days that followed, and she demanded a photograph to prove she had kept that promise, even though better was now an impossibility. Helen uncovered one final document that moved her to tears. It was a letter composed by Eleanor Davies during her confinement at McLean Asylum, dated 1901, located within the asylum's own archives. "My dearest Lily, I should never have asked you to make such a vow. You were only a child. You took my words, spoken in a moment of distress, and transformed them into a sacred duty that ultimately claimed your life. You remained with Rose when you should have been taken to safety. You inhaled the same air as your dying sister. You wore yourself out caring for her, and when she was gone, you could not release her hand because you had promised me. You perished because of a pledge you should never have been bound to honor. I exist in a perpetual torment, knowing that I was responsible for the death of both my children. I lost Rose to her illness, and I lost you to your own love. This portrait tortures me because it captures the precise moment of your sacrifice. There you stand, already succumbing to the fever, pretending for my benefit that all was well. Pretending for my sake that Rose was still alive. You crafted one final beautiful falsehood because you loved me too deeply to let me remember only the pain. Please forgive me, my darling girl. Please forgive me. I beg you to find your rest. The letter was never sent. It was discovered in Eleanor's room following her death, addressed but never sealed. The photograph remains in the archives, a testament to a promise that was kept at the ultimate price. It is a memorial not to death itself, but to the devastating burden of love. When Helen regards it now, she no longer sees a deception. She sees a child's desperate attempt to shield her mother from an unbearable reality. She sees a devotion that transcended the boundary between life and death. She sees the very image of love, when it will not yield not to the inevitable, not to mercy, and not even to peace. The photograph remains sealed within the archives. Some loves are simply too profound and too painful for public display. Subscribe for more hidden stories behind history's most heartbreaking artifacts.